All right, time for the second period here on the Puck Podcast, and we want to give a quick hello to all of the folks checking us out on Periscope as Doug catches his phone between his legs.
Quick cat-like reflexes.
Yeah, it was amazing.
Ed, we got breaking news.
Oh, boy.
Hit me with it.
Auga, breaking news, auga.
Breaking news update from the first period, a story we brought you. Brock Nelson has signed a 3-year deal worth an average annual price of $2.5 million. So apparently they didn't hear anything for 6 weeks, and then all of a sudden,
on the eve of the deadline,
yeah, isn't that coincidence?
Magic happens.
Yes.
Well, good for the Islanders.
Yep, and good for Brock Nelson.
Yeah.
He gets a nice, let's see, some quick math here, Ed. $7.5 million over the next 3 years to play hockey for the New York Islanders. And all is good going into training camp for the Islanders. So there you go. But that is a topic for another day. That's another division.
That's true.
We're here to talk about the Pacific Division. We're on Periscope. There are 19 of you, 20 of you joining us, and the number continues to grow. And luckily, this week, listener Jeff, very kind to transcribe your disappearing comments.
Yeah, because we're not fast enough to be able to see what you said. I mean, Doug would have to have his phone like this, just staring at it. And he doesn't want to do that. So we thank you for the assistance this week.
Yes.
And by the way, on Periscope, it is a big upset this week on the Puck Podcast. I am not wearing a black shirt.
Why are you dressed so normally? You look like a normal human being.
Well, thank
as
you.
Opposed to a guy that is going to or from a sporting event. You usually have a T-shirt blazoned with some sort of sports logo. You often have a hat on.
Well,
why the sudden?
Well, judging by the way you're dressed, this is going to make no sense at all. But when we come to do the show here at the 20th Century Fox movie lot, and the Fox Network Center is nearby, there are a lot of people working here and dressed semi-casually, I guess, kind of business casual, and so I kind of feel uncomfortable wearing like a hat and a T-shirt, even though that's exactly what Doug is wearing right now. So I try and wear a little something different, a little nicer. But anyway,
I class it up by wearing a plain T-shirt.
Yes, very classy. When I walked in, I thought, classy.
Yeah, this guy looks professional. Somebody wanted to know, Doug, are you not shaving? I'm lazy. My wife does not like it. She wants me to shave about 2 weeks ago, but I was going on a man's trip with my dad and my brother. And
Man trip.
Of course, I haven't shaved in about 3 weeks, so that's not really the excuse. Yep, that's the growth. It's a slow growth, and it's the natural goatee. You know, the cheeks are very barren. Right? Would you agree?
Sure.
I
am also very lazy, but this is only a few days, so. We
no
are going
play
to,
for Mr. Gray.
We had him on our radio show the other day.
Who?
Still Clyde Frazier. Still,
oh, yeah?
Still plugging the Just for Gray or Just for Men Gray.
Just for Gray.
Whatever. Just for Men.
Is he really?
Yeah.
That's his.
Him and Keith Hernandez were on together.
To plug that?
Yeah. Remember they were doing those commercials together?
Why would you have them on to do an ad, basically, for that stuff?
That's the way it works in radio most of the time when you have...
But why would you want to have them on?
Well, Keith Hernandez, I can't believe we're discussing this. Keith Hernandez is the Mets television analyst, and Clyde Frazier is the Knicks television analyst. So
then there you go. Then that's relevant. Otherwise, I was going to say, it'd be like having, Kent Tecove and Earl the Pearl for Grecian Formula. That's the best I could do. How's that for a reference? Was that
Grecian Formula? Era? Oh yeah, the kids are crazy about using that Grecian Formula.
Oh, my brother and my dad both still purchasing Brute.
Do they put it on their hand and slap it and then give it one of these things?
I didn't watch them apply it, but I saw it on the counter.
Rooms?
No, I saw it on the counter in the bathroom, and I went in there and I'm like, Brute. What year is this?
English leather.
Yeah, I said, where's the Old Spice? Which has made a comeback.
Is it really?
Yeah.
Well, that's wonderful news. We are going to preview the Pacific Division and the Western Conference of the National Hockey League. We're going to give you a quick little thumbnail of each team. We'll go alphabetically. We'll tell you some additions for this season and some subtractions in case you may have forgotten. And just give our quick thoughts on what this team's biggest question mark is going into the season, what their prospects are for this year, what the outlook is, so on and so forth. And again, we've got who is the listener who's helping us out?
Listener
with this?
Jeff is
Listener
helping
Jeff
us out, and
gonna,
he is. Somebody actually said we're previewing the Pacific Division. Somebody has already spoiled it by saying, giving away the ending, the spoilers. The Sharks will win the cup.
No, they won't.
No, the Calder Cup.
Man,
you know, I was at the. I talked about in the first period that I was in Mississippi. We went to a lot of Civil War places, right, sites, and so we were at Shiloh National Military Park. Huge battle at Shiloh, like 23,000 people died.
I'm aware of it. Yeah.
And they had a movie that was 45 minutes long. My dad and my brother went in there. I said, I'd like to tour the grounds. They have over 5,000 acres. I'd like to tour them while you guys are watching the movie. So they went in. So I'm waiting in the lobby for them to come out of the movie, and there was an old couple ready to go in for the next showing, and they were asking the park ranger. They said, "What is the movie about?" And he said, "It's about the history of the park, obviously the battle and blah blah blah." And I said, "No spoilers, please, on the ending." You know, and the guy looked at me like he was about to, like I was serious, like I didn't know who won. He was very confused. Like, how would this young man not know? But my parents, or my brother and my dad, said it was a fantastic movie, so I wish I had gone and seen it. Apparently they hired like actors, and it wasn't just in 1861, it was actually like, you know, kind of set at the time, and so it was very good to see. And then you go out and you see the very grounds that they won. But the spoiler alert there of the Sharks will win the cup, so there you go.
That's what jogged your memory to share that story with us?
Yeah.
Great.
Sorry.
Let us begin. Do you want to read any? Do we need to read any first, or you want to get going here on?
We say, well, only if they give the captaincy back to Marlowe, and
better give him more than that.
No, none of us. No need.
You know, this is a
to
good
see
idea.
The Sharks win the cup.
This is a good idea, but it's so far away, and your eyesight isn't the greatest in the world.
See.
You sure?
Yeah. Can you read it?
Barely.
I can read it.
Okay.
Somebody is requesting a Photoshop of you and me in a Just for Men package.
All right. Well, we'll see if we can get our staff to work on that.
Yeah. Eddie looks like he's eating a corn dog.
So what is Doug eating? He's holding a microphone and it's the exact same thing. Corn dogs are quite delicious. Let's see. The Anaheim Ducks would be the first team.
If I could give hearts
list.
to that Eddie's eating a corn dog, I would. Anyway, thank you, Jeff, for that.
Well,
we will continue. The Anaheim Ducks. Comments on the Anaheim Ducks. Questions on the Anaheim Ducks, if you have it. And there we go.
Last year, the Ducks finished with a record of 51, 24, and 7. Lost in 7 games to the Blackhawks in the Western Conference Finals. Bruce Boudreau is entering his 5th season as head coach. As far as some of the additions for the Ducks, we've got coming in goalie Anton Khudobin, left winger Carl Hagelin, defenseman Kevin Bieksa, center Sean Horkoff, right winger Chris Stewart, and also Paul McLean as an assistant coach.
He was one of the coaches at the charity game I went and saw. So I got to see the bug-eyed fat walrus.
How could you miss him? Was his doppelganger there as well?
Not that I saw. Well, maybe it was his doppelganger that was coaching. Who would have known?
Very good. As far as some of the subtractions for the Ducks, right winger Kyle Palmieri, defenseman Francois Beauchemin, left winger Matt Bolesky, goalie Jason LaBarbera, friend of the show.
Damn right.
All gone. Doug, obviously, the Ducks last year very much looking to make that next step. They had the big acquisition of bringing in Ryan Kessler, and they got very close, obviously losing in that Game 7 to the Blackhawks to making it to the Stanley Cup Final. Some fairly significant changes this offseason for the Ducks as they obviously weren't satisfied with the way last season ended and have decided there needed to be some tweaks made to try and get them over the hump and into the Stanley Cup Final this season.
Yeah, the things that they've added that they think they were missing is scoring depth, speed, and a little bit of grit on defense. They got rid of Francois Beauchemin, who was probably, at the end of his viability as a top 4 defenseman in the NHL. If he is a top 4 defenseman, it says number 4. You don't want him any higher than that. They replaced him with Kevin Bieksa, which I think is an upgrade for this coming season. And he's got some nastiness that he brings with him on that end, which they may need because they got a lot of skilled puck movers in Hampus Lindholm, Cam Fowler, Sami Vatanen, and even Simone Dupre is a guy that can move the puck. Clayton Stoner and Kevin Bieksa will be the the crease clearing guys and the defensively responsible guys as well. Bringing in Carl Hagelin for Emerson Edom, I thought was a master stroke. I really expect him to have a good season, probably on the line with Ryan Kessler and Jakob Silverberg on the second line. It's still to be determined who is on that first line left wing. Right now, it looks like Patrick Maroon. Could be Nick Ritchie, a rookie. If he plays his way into the AHL or into the NHL, it would be maybe getting a chance there. And then adding depth guys like Chris Stewart and Mike Santorelli and Sean Horkoff to have a rebuilt fourth line of veterans. I like that a lot. I give them a good chance to play some good minutes there on the fourth line and to allow Bruce Boudreau to rotate through with as many players as possible and keeping guys fresh. So I like that. I think they're going to be very good. I like the depth in net with Anton Khudobin giving a veteran backup to Frederik Andersen and allowing John Gibson to play in the AHL until he is needed. And now it's just a matter of who rounds out the line combinations, how we figure things out. The roster is pretty set, I think, other than that first line left wing. And it should be, barring the keeping them healthy, should be a very good year in Anaheim once again for the regular season.
Do you feel confident that at this point Frederik Andersen is good enough to get you to the Stanley Cup final or win the Stanley Cup, or is it still a major question mark going forward?
He absolutely is. He was good enough to get him a 3-2 series lead against the Blackhawks in the Western Conference Final. That's one win away from the Stanley Cup Final. I think whoever came out of the Western Conference was going to win the Cup last year. I think he would have beaten the Lightning had they gotten that far. They didn't. But I absolutely think that if you're good enough to win 11 games in the Stanley Cup Final or Stanley Cup playoffs, you're certainly good enough to win 12. And from there, obviously, you've got a 50-50 chance, basically, of winning the Stanley Cup. So I have all the faith in Frederik Andersen. He's still entering his prime and getting better. And I think last year taught him a lot about how to pace himself and the conditioning and the focus, long-term focus he's going to need to succeed in the playoffs.
I think we know that the Ducks' bar has been set very high. We know that Bruce Boudreau has never gotten a team to the Stanley Cup final. If he gets this team again to the Western Conference final, but they don't advance, is that enough to have him come back again next season? Or where's the bar, I guess, in your mind, where Bruce Boudreau needs to be to show that he's still the coach to get them where they want to be?
And somebody had asked that, what will it take for them to fire Boudreau?
Obviously, if they have a collapse of any kind during the regular season, he's going to be gone soon.
I think if they don't reach the Western Conference Final, his job would be in jeopardy. This team, 2 years ago, they lost in the first round. Last year, or 3 years ago, they lost in the first round. This year, they lost, or 2 years ago, lost in the second round to the Stanley Cup favorites, or champions, and now last year, the Western Conference Final. So they've taken a step forward each year under Boudreau. The next step is to reach the Stanley Cup Final. If they take a step back, I think his job could be in jeopardy. And if they lose in the first round, I think he will absolutely be fired. But I think it's Western Conference Final at a minimum for him to feel comfortable about returning the following season. And obviously, if he reaches the Stanley Cup Final, there's no doubt he's coming back. I expect a very good regular season. Teams always play well in the regular season under Bruce Boudreau for whatever reason. He knows how to motivate teams on a nightly basis. And they have depth at all positions, speed, skill. They've got great puck-moving defensemen. They've got playoff experience. Their weakness is that they don't have that true number one defenseman that you want, like a Drew Doughty. They don't have an elite goalie yet, and they're Game 7 failures. But I think they will absolutely repeat as division champions for a fourth straight year.
Someone says it is odd that we don't look at each other while the other is speaking.
Yeah, that's just a habit. I don't look at people when I talk to them. Do you?
Usually, yeah, I think so. But
I mean, it's not like I look off to the distance.
We're not TV guys necessarily. I've done a little bit of that, but you usually, when the other person's talking, you usually don't just like stare at them. You look at the camera, you maybe glance at them every once in a while, that kind of thing. So I don't know, maybe I'm taking it from that. Yeah, you're making me very uncomfortable right now. Let's go from the Anaheim Ducks to
we have the comments here that we asked for. They said that Hagelin's a great addition to the Duck. What, if anything, changed on the Ducks' blue line? Sorry, it was discussed. Apparently, they already got their answer. And it's, I think the Ducks have one more chance at the Cup. I think they got a lot more chances. I think the Ducks' window is still opening.
Yeah.
The young players that they have on this team are very impressive, and they've got a lot of talent in the AHL waiting to come up. I think the Ducks' window is just opening, and it's going to stay open for quite a while. They've positioned themselves perhaps better than anyone in the NHL to be a Stanley Cup contender now and in the future because they have a ton of cap space. They've got great prospects, so they have no problem retaining the talent they have, and they've got a lot of talent to come up in the system as well. So I think they're in a unique situation in that sense. And what changed on the blue line is I think they got a little bit more physical and a little bit more mobile as well. Francois Beauchemin was not fleet of foot. Kevin Bieksa isn't either, but I think he's a little bit faster and more mobile than Francois Beauchemin.
Let us move on to the Arizona Coyotes. Last year, a record of 24-50-8. They finished 7th in the Pacific Division. Of course, did not make the playoffs. Dave Tippett entering his 7th season as head coach of the Coyotes. Some additions for Arizona include defenseman Nicholas Grossman, center Boyd Gordon, right winger Steve Downey, goalie Anders Lindback. As far as some of the, there's still some more here, excuse me. Zbigniew Michalek coming back again.
Yeah.
Right winger Brad Richardson joined the team.
Boomerang, Zbigniew Michalek.
And center Antoine Vermette also coming back to the Coyotes. Some subtractions. Center Sam Gagner, left winger Lori Kopakoski, right winger Martin Erat, and right winger David Moss. Doesn't look too promising for the Coyotes going into this year. Obviously, they've got a few young names that I think people are excited about seeing. Anthony Duclair, who came over in the trade with the Rangers, is a young guy who is exciting. You've talked a lot about Max Domi. This year he finally makes the team and becomes an exciting player. But
I don't know about that, but he'll make the team.
Other than that, what are you looking forward if you're a Coyotes fan?
The only thing that you can really get excited about is the youth of this team. And in addition to those guys, you've got some recent first-round picks like Brendan Perlini, Christian Dvorak. Maybe, you get these guys coming in. But for the most part, this is a very young team that at the same time is very old. And guys like Shane Doan, Zbigniew Michalek, Marty Hansel, Antoine Vermette, Brad Richardson, Boyd Gordon. It's like you got this split between you're either an old player that doesn't have a long-term future in the NHL or you're a very young player just starting out in the career. The rare middle ground is the best defenseman on the team, Oliver Ekman-Larsson. He's in his prime, and it's a prime that is being absolutely wasted on a miserable team. But he's going to be a good player for them defensively. The problem is, do they have anything behind that? Michael Stone, Connor Murphy, are those guys good enough to give him the support he needs on defense? Zbigniew Michalek is what he is. He's a shot-blocking, stay-at-home defenseman. Nicholas Grossman, Klaus Dahlbeck, who's going to round out this defense? It's not good. Can Mike Smith regain the form that he had when he was a starting goalie? They hired his former goalie coach that, when he first started playing in the net, he had this guy as his goalie guru, and they've hired him as his goalie coach. So it's basically his security blanket is now in place, and you have to hope that gets him back to a place, because a lot of sports is mental. And if he feels confident, and if he feels like he's going to go out there and succeed, maybe he will. He's got the physical ability to do it. We've seen that in the past. But he's going to need to be a lot better than he's been in the last couple of years in order for them to make any noise this season.
He's going to need to show it soon, or else he'll be on the bench and headed towards being a number 2 guy bouncing around for the rest of his career.
Right. I mean, he's still got a few years left on a contract, though. So that and it's a good-sized contract. And this is a team that unfortunately needs the salaries just to get above the floor. They traded for Chris Pronger simply to get them over the salary cap floor. This is a team that is not trying to win this season. They're making no bones about that. They're not going to go into camp with aspirations of the Stanley Cup or even the playoffs. This is a rebuilding year for the future of the team. And that's why it'll be interesting to see if Shane Doan at any point waives his no-trade clause and agrees to move and actually try and win a cup before he retires. Or if
why won't Doan go somewhere else is one of the questions.
His loyalty to the franchise. That would be
He likes living in Phoenix, too.
Yeah, but why not at the trade deadline when it's only for 2 or 3 months?
Yeah.
Go play somewhere where you can maybe win a cup and then come back and sign a 1-year deal if you want with the Arizona Coyotes, as Antoine Vermette did. He can talk to Antoine Vermette about, hey, How was it winning a Stanley Cup and playing for the Chicago Blackhawks? It was amazing. You really should try it. If they want you, I would highly recommend you do it. So I would say the strengths for the Coyotes this coming season is their youthful exuberance. They've got nothing to lose, and they can just go out there and play with house money. The weakness is they don't have a lot of skill, they don't have much on defense, and their goaltending isn't great as based on last year. So I predict a very tough year for the Arizona Coyotes, and I think they will finish dead last in the Pacific Division.
Well, we've talked about what appears to be the prohibitive number one draft pick for next season, and that's Auston Matthews, who is from Arizona. We've had, the fail for Nail and all those types of things. We saw last year what Buffalo did to try and get a chance at Connor McDavid or Jack Eichel. They ended up getting one of those guys. Your thoughts on is the fact that Auston Matthews is from Arizona? Is that anything that would put them over the top as far as maybe wanting to fail to get that kid, or is it just? I mean, he's the best player available. Anybody would want him, but do you think that that's in the mind of any of the Coyotes brass to get this homegrown kid to try and help sell tickets or anything like that?
Oh, I think absolutely. I mean, it's one thing to have the first overall pick in the draft, and you're going to get a great player that is allegedly a franchise player, a generational talent. But if you're the Arizona Coyotes and you have an opportunity to get a guy that is a Arizona native and put him on your roster and market him to your franchise and your fans, I think that's a once in a lifetime opportunity that they are obviously making every effort to pursue. So, and they'd be fools not to. They're not going to win this year, so why not play the young players and sign guys that are on short-term contracts as veterans in the hopes that you can sign that guy or draft him so that you can market him. Because I think if they drafted him, I think all the local news affiliates would pick up on that story more so than they would if they were drafting a kid from Fairbanks, or if they were drafting a guy from, Sweden or something. The fact that he's a local guy and you can talk to people that knew him growing up and he knows the places to go and eat and he knows the culture, I think that helps a lot.
All right, let's move on to the Calgary Flames, one of the bigger surprises from last season, a record of 45-30-7. They finished third in the Pacific Division. They lost in 5 games to the Ducks in the Western Conference semifinals. Bob Hartley's back for his 4th season behind the bench. Some additions for the Flames, very notably defenseman Dougie Hamilton, as well as right winger Michael Frolik. As far as subtractions for the Flames, really only Rafael Diaz was one player of note who has left them. In net, Kari Ramo, we think, is the number one goalie going into it. But otherwise, we talked about last week, a great young line to build around with Monahan and Goudreau and Hoodler. Defensively, Mark Giordano hopefully coming back healthy for them and picking up where he left off last year. You add Dougie Hamilton. The Flames certainly, I think, will be one of the trendy picks this year as a team to kind of make that next step. But you can certainly understand why there's a lot of optimism in Calgary right now.
You certainly can, but I am taking the opposite approach. I think this team takes a step back towards reality. I think they won a lot of games in dramatic fashion. We talked about their comeback nature last year. This is a team that put themselves in a lot of bad situations and then found a way out of it and found points. I don't think that is likely to happen for a second year in a row, and I don't like the uncertainty that they have in net going in for a second year in a row with the Kari Ramo, Jonas Hiller experiment. I'd like to see them settle on one of the two and go with him. But there's no doubting that their defense has improved, adding Dougie Hamilton to what was already a good defense. Mark Giordano, TJ Brody, Dennis Weidman, Chris Russell, and now with Dougie Hamilton as well, is a very nice defense. And the young players that they have certainly build their strength. They've got high-end, young, skilled players. Johnny Gaudreau, Lance Boma, obviously Sean Monahan and Sam Bennett. And then when you add in the veterans that they have, like Yuri Hoodler, who had a career year last year, this team has got a lot of offense to put on the ice on a regular basis. But I wonder if they can find that consistency and the fortune that they found last season. If they can put themselves in better situations early in games, then great. But I don't know that their goaltending will be consistent enough to do that. I think they're going to find themselves in the same kind of situations, but won't be able to bail themselves out as quickly. Teams are certainly not going to take them for granted this year or take them lightly. So I think they're going to be at a little bit, they're going to have to play at a higher level starting on opening night. I think their weakness is their goaltending, and I think their weakness is their scoring depth. Once you get into that third and fourth line, I don't think there's enough scoring depth there to keep teams honest and keep teams from focusing on those top lines. We'll see if that's the case or not, but I certainly think they are good enough to make the playoffs, and I've got them in third place in the Pacific Division this coming season.
Some of the comments, and again, we thank Jeff for helping us out with getting some of the listener comments that are going on Periscope. Some of the comments are, my girlfriend team for this year, Flames are fun. There's no doubt about that.
That's a pyro that wrote that.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Oh,
it's a
well,
pyro.
Not so.
Yeah, that's unfortunate.
Not
when you read it like that, it's not.
No, it's not as fun as I thought it was going to be. Don't like the goalie tandem, but I think they will be good. They proved that they can do it without Giordano.
That's for sure.
They're going from worst finish to best in the Pacific. Or is that a question or a statement? Are they going from worst finish to best in the Pacific? I don't know about the worst finish. I mean, if that was an old Arizona question or not. But we move on.
Yeah. I mean, look, what do you think of Calgary? Do you think they will build on last year and improve in the regular season?
I do. I think I agree with you. They're not going to be able to rely on that third period magic and be one of the best teams in the NHL coming from behind, but I don't think they're going to have to be because I think they're improved, especially defensively, and I think with Kari Ramo or if it's Jonas Hiller, I think it looks like Ramo, because the defense has improved, they're not going to have to be as great as they might have to be otherwise in net. So yeah, I think the Flames are legit. I think that they will improve off of last year and that they will be I'm not saying that they're a contender necessarily for the Cup, but I think they're a dangerous team.
All right. Well, they were third last year. I've got them in third this year, and we'll see. I've
got them in second.
I've got them coming with a slight decrease in point total, but certainly good enough to make the playoffs. And then in the playoffs, that's a dangerous team, and I think they're going to be the Calgary Flames could be a team that is really fun to watch in the 3-on-3 overtimes, which we didn't discuss in the first period. Did you hear? The NHL is going to basically mandate, I think 25 preseason games will go to a 3-on-3 overtime, whether the game's tied at the end of regulation or not.
That's weird.
Because the teams have asked for basically a preseason opportunity, regardless of the score, to practice, get some real world practice with their 3-on-3 combinations.
I did not hear that. That is interesting.
And that starts on Sunday. The preseason is upon us. The training camp starts Friday. Preseason starts Sunday, the games, and they will have at least one game on Sunday that will absolutely go to a 3-on-3 overtime.
All right, let's move. We'll stay in Alberta, but we'll move over to the Edmonton Oilers. Last year, a record of 24-44 and 14-6 in the Pacific Division. Of course, didn't make the playoffs. Todd McClellan comes in as his first year as head coach. As far as additions, of course, Connor McDavid, but also goalie Cam Talbot, defenseman Eric Gryba, left winger Lori Korpikoski, and center Mark Letestu, along with defenseman Andrei Sekera. Subtraction, center Boyd Gordon and center Derek Roy are gone. Is this finally the year, Doug, where we see marked improvement from the Edmonton Oilers?
No.
Slight improvement.
Can you get worse than what they were last year?
Yes. They didn't finish last in the Western Conference, so I guess it could be worse.
Didn't they?
No, Arizona finished last.
Oh, oof. I think they're going to be about what they were last year. A little bit. They're going to be better in the overall points that they earned this season, but they're certainly not going to be a playoff contender, in my opinion. I think their goaltending and defense are still far too questionable for that to be the case, and I don't see them making a huge jump just because they added Cam Talbot and improved their defense a little bit. Andrei Sekera will help, but I don't think he's a top-pairing defenseman. You saw him with the Kings. He's a good second-pairing defenseman on a good team.
I would agree with that.
A top-pairing defenseman on a bad team, I think he's going to get exposed. I don't think the team defense is where it needs to be. They're going to be a lot of fun to watch, though. There's no doubt that if the Ducks aren't playing and the Oilers are, I will be watching the Oilers because I think this team, with their young talent on offense, is going to be a lot of fun to watch. They, much like the Coyotes, have nothing to lose. They've got speed to burn, and they've got really high-end, young, skilled players that should be just exciting to watch on any given night. So to watch the development of guys like Taylor Hall, certainly Connor McDavid, Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, and the rest of these young players, Jordan Eberle, can Nail Yakupov regain his scoring touch from his rookie season. I think Edmonton's going to be a lot of fun to watch, but I think their defense and goaltending are going to keep them from getting into the playoffs, and it is a building process, but this will be the first. This is the first year that I can say at least they're taking a different approach with their head coach and their GM, and it feels different in Edmonton. I don't think the results are going to be drastically different, but they will be better. I don't expect another 20-plus win season. I expect 30-plus wins, but I don't see them making the playoffs. It's still too big of a jump and too deep of a division and too deep of a conference.
We talked about the Oilers maybe having the best offseason of any franchise when you consider what they've done to restructure the organization, from, as you mentioned, from GM to head coach, and also Connor McDavid, bringing him in to infuse, obviously, his talent into the lineup. But that having been said, it's hard to believe that initially, right away, that we're going to see a huge change on the ice. I think I tend to agree with you. Again, another maybe step forward, but enough to really make some noise in the division, unlikely at this point.
This is the team, though, that every year there's that surprise team. Last year it was Calgary that we thought, okay, when's the clock going to strike midnight, and this team realized that they're the Calgary Flames, and we all thought it was when Mark Giordano went down for the season with an injury, we thought, okay, that's it, they're done. There's always those teams that surprise, and if you can predict a surprise team, I would say this is it. If the Oilers get off to a good start, and Cam Talbot is a strong presence in net, they are going to be, they could make the jump from 6th to 2nd or 3rd in this division. I truly believe that if they get on a roll and find their rhythm on defense and in net, or just find a way to outscore people, this is a team that could make the jump that quickly and get themselves into the playoffs. And I don't think anybody would want to play this team in the playoffs if they made it, because their speed and their skill would be dangerous at all times.
Someone posted number 1 draft pick again.
Well, I mean, if they miss the playoffs, they're in the lottery.
Yeah.
And luck would, fortune smiles upon them and they win the lottery again. I think the NHL would collectively vomit if that happened. But Edmonton would just, it would be Mardi Gras in Edmonton if that was the case, if they could add Austin Matthews. But then again, eventually they got to get defensive help. And you wonder if at any point in this season we see some of their depth at forward traded for legitimate defensive help.
Let's move on to the Los Angeles Kings. Record last year of 40, 27, and 15. They finished 4th in the Pacific Division, did not make the playoffs as one of the more disappointing teams from last season. Daryl Sutter is entering his 5th season as head coach. Additions for the Kings, left winger Milan Lucic and goalie Jonas Enroth. Subtractions for the Kings, defenseman Robin Regehr, center Mike Richards, defenseman Andrej Sekera, center Jarrett Stoll, and right winger Justin Williams. I had on here Slava Voinov, question mark, as one of the big things going into the season. That has now been solved for the LA Kings. Christian Ehrhoff would be another addition, by the way, that I did not mention on there, speaking of Slava Voinov. So the Kings, obviously, a lot of talk about them getting rest that they needed for this coming season. I don't buy too much into that, but it's certainly from there's no excuses for this team now going forward. Interesting to see what Milan Lucic will bring, and how he plays with his new teammates. Going to be on that top line with Andrej Kopitar and Marian Gaborik. It looks like, at least a start, although Daryl Sutter, you never know with him moving things around. Basically, Lucic is coming in, replacing Justin Williams. You've got Nick Shore, who saw time last year, replacing Mike Richards. He'll probably move up on the 3rd line in place of Jarrett Stoll. Tanner Pearson, who missed a lot of the season, will be back in the lineup from injury defensively. We talked about Christian Ehrhoff coming in to try and fill some of the void for Slava Voinov. But again, we'll see what the Kings do, how they've learned from last year and that bitterness that they had to have through the entire offseason to see them not even get a chance to defend their crown, so to speak. Not a lot of excuses for this team going forward. Obviously, Drew Doughty, one of the best defensemen in the back end. Jonathan Quick is certainly strong in net. Jeff Carter and Andre Kopitar up the middle. Great 1-2 punch at center. So we'll see. A lot of people, I think, are going to pick the Kings to bounce back from last year, I would hope. After I mentioned one of the most disappointing teams in the NHL a year ago. What do you think about Milan Lucic? What do you think about his addition into this lineup?
I think he's going to bring a nastiness that the team already had, but may have been. He brings an edge that they may have missed since they won that first Stanley Cup. Jarrett Stoll, I think, will be the most, and Justin Williams will be the most missed offensively. Jarrett Stoll was great at winning defensive zone faceoffs, and they don't have that this year. They're going to have to find somebody that can consistently win defensive zone faceoffs. Justin Williams, Mr. Game 7, Mr. Clutch in the playoffs, and always seemed to have the good hands when they needed him for a goal. He's gone. Who replaces that scoring production? Milan Lucic is a guy that's going to score 20-plus goals, hit everything that moves, and be an antagonist. And that could be a great addition. It could not fit with their system. It is yet to be determined. It's either going to be a great success or it's going to be a one-year experiment and he's gone. So I like that in the sense that he's only here for the 1 year on this contract and they have the option of re-signing him or letting him go after this year or at least trying to re-sign him. But my concern with the Kings is on defense. And we talked about Drew Doughty having to play Herculean minutes last year. And I don't think he's going to have to play as many minutes this year, but he's going to have the onus each and every game that he's got to be the guy that goes up against the other team's top players and shuts them down. And if he doesn't, or if he gets hurt or struggles in any way, I think the team is really going to struggle defensively. Jonathan Quick is good, but he can't do it by himself, and the team plays good team defense. But a lot of those guys that were part of the success they had on team defense are no longer there. So it'll be an interesting year of transition. I think they will bounce back. I think there was no excuse for what they did last year. I mean, this whole rest thing, the Blackhawks don't seem to need rest. They seem to bounce back every year and get it done just fine. So that was never a valid excuse in my opinion. I think what the Kings have learned, if anything, is to not take the regular season for granted. And I expect to see a focus from them in October and November and December that we have not seen in the past. This team has flipped a switch in the second half of the season and played lights out after the All-Star break in 3 of the past 4 years. Last year, that switch, they flipped it and nothing happened. And they sputtered their way through the entire regular season, ended up missing the playoffs entirely, which is unacceptable for a team that won the Stanley Cup and pretty much brought back the entire roster. So for this, they've got the talent, they've got the coaching, and they've got the depth at all the positions they need to have it at. There's no excuse for this team not to have success, and I have them finishing in second place in the Pacific Division. I don't think I predicted my finish for the Oilers, but I have them finishing in sixth place.
I also had the Oilers in sixth. I had the Ducks in first. I assume you also had the Ducks in first. I have the Kings in third place in the Pacific Division. Let's move on.
Has Sutter lost the room, Ed?
I don't think so. I think, you use sometimes you use stories to fit the narrative. You know what I mean? I was talking to somebody about this with the Blackhawks when all the rumors were flying about Duncan Keith and Patrick Sharp and how, the infighting was going on, and if somehow they were to fail in the playoffs, they would bring back that narrative. They don't have the chemistry anymore. Behind the scenes, something was going on. You use what happens to kind of fit the story. I think because the Kings didn't make the playoffs and were so disappointing, when that story came out about the players closing the door on Daryl Sutter or whatever happened, then that became a bigger story. If they had gone into the playoffs and had some success, no one even talks about it. But I think sometimes those stories get used to fill a narrative. I think that may have been the case with that. Look,
I think it was an explanation of why is this team struggling when they have all the talent and everything's there? Some people were pointing to, they haven't been able to get a good off season. They're tired, and you and I both dismissed that. Other people point at, we hear there's problems between the players and the coaching staff. And as an example, after a win, they locked him out of the locker room. And maybe that happens in the NHL on a regular basis. I don't know. It's certainly unique that it gets made public. And I don't think it's a good sign of what the leadership... Like, if you're Dustin Brown as the captain, and you see the teammates barricading the door so that the head coach can't get in, don't you say something? Or is he, maybe he's one of the guys barricading the door, I don't know. But it seems like from a veteran group, that's an odd move. And I don't think it certainly points to some sort of disconnect of him wearing out the message of just, we don't want to hear it again. We know the speech. We've heard it a million times. We don't feel like hearing it tonight. You're locked out. And they don't have enough roster turnover to really get that to change. The veterans on this team are still the same. So if it's the same speeches again and he takes the same approach, I wonder if that does wear thin. Because he seems like a tough guy to play for. He's demanding. He's certainly not a player's coach in the sense that he's one of the guys and buddy-buddy. So I wonder if that does wear itself thin. And if it does, that could be the poison. Like we talked about Bruce Boudreau. Would he get fired if they don't make the Stanley Cup Finals, if they don't make the Western Conference? Does Darryl Sutter, with 2 cups in 4 years, is he on the hot seat if this team is in a position to not make the playoffs or gets bounced in the first round?
Well, yes, he is, because I think they feel like they have enough talent to go beyond that. But again, there was nothing wrong with their chemistry when they won 2 cups in 3 years. Then they don't make the playoffs, and now there's a chemistry issue. I think that, again, people look for explanations and look for reasons, and that was one of the stories that they brought up, that, oh, well, he's lost the room and so on and so forth. I don't know if that's true or not. Again, yeah, I think he's a hard guy to play for. I don't think he's a lot of fun to be around in good times and bad, but I think he's also proven that he's a good coach, and you don't win 2 Stanley Cups in 3 years without having the respect to your players, I don't think.
Kings are going to make the playoffs, and Bailey is going to suit up. I've heard the travel schedule was difficult, which these are comments from Periscope, by the way, which I think is feces, absolute feces. The Surging Flames bumped them when they were on the regular season cruise control, and bring pancakes back.
I think Dustin Penner has called it a day.
I think he would be stunned if his phone rang and it was an NHL GM. He is not prepared to report training camp.
He's ready for the alumni game or the fantasy camp. But that's
he'd be a good one for that, because he's a fun guy. And he can tell stories about winning cups. And he should just do that in Southern California. He won a cup with the Ducks. He won a cup with the Kings. Just bounce back and forth between fantasy camps. And he's welcome in either rink.
Let's go to Northern California and check in on the San Jose Sharks. Last year, a record of 40, 33, and 9. They finished 5th in the Pacific Division, did not make the playoffs. They've got a coaching change. Pete DeBoer comes in from New Jersey to take over behind the bench. Additions for the Sharks: goalie Martin Jones, defenseman Paul Martin, and right winger Joel Ward. Subtractions for the Sharks: goalie Anthony Niemi, defenseman Scott Hannon, and defenseman Matt Irwin.
And as we talked about, potential addition, Raffi Torres, if he makes it back from being injured. We've been waiting for the turnover in San Jose for many years. It isn't coming. The players don't want to be traded. They like being there. They got no movement clauses, no trade clauses. So Patrick Marleau, back again. Joe Thornton, back again. He and Doug Wilson, the GM, had words publicly last year. He's back anyway. If this was a Canadian team, it would be the number 1 story in the media. It is not, so it is just kind of laughed off and nobody really thinks about it too much. But the San Jose Sharks still have good veteran talent. They've got some young players that they're working into the system as well. Joe Pavelski is in the prime of his career and is by far the best player on the team at this point. Logan Couture, Tommy Wingels, another guy that likes to hit. They've got depth, and I like Brent Burns, the Sasquatch on defense. I like the way he plays the game. I think he's going to be paired with Paul Martin to give them more of a stay-at-home defenseman, to let Brent Burns wander and play his offensive game. Brendan Dillon for a full season now after coming over from the Stars last year. We'll see if he can. I still think their weakness is defense in their own end. I think they have good offensive defensemen, Mark-Edward Vlasic, Brent Burns, Justin Braun. I think their defense in their own end is a problem. I think their goaltending is a problem. I'm not sold on Martin Jones being the answer in net. And I think we found out last year that Alex Stalock is certainly not the answer in net. So I think they've got enough offense and they've got enough at forward to win a lot of hockey games. I don't think they have enough on defense, and I don't think they have enough in net to win a lot of games. So I think this is a slightly better version of the Edmonton Oilers on defense and in net. Not as good as the Edmonton Oilers at forward, but I think they will be in fourth place in the Pacific Division, fighting for a wild card spot.
I have them in fourth place as well. I agree with you. It's almost as if they're they're too good to kind of completely blow it up and rebuild, but they're not good enough that you feel like there's really any chance that this team is a serious Stanley Cup contender. I wonder if you're a Sharks fan, do you almost wish that it got so bad and was such a horrible situation that eventually Patrick Marleau and Joe Thornton would say, I got to get the hell out of here, and waive their movement clauses to leave?
I don't know that they would say that, though, even if it was terrible. They like playing where they are. They like the city. And Doug Wilson did everything he could publicly, other than shaming him, to try and get the guy out of there, to get Joe Thornton to waive the no-trade clause. He won't do it. So why would they lost? They missed the playoffs last year, and they still stuck around. I mean, other than making it a toxic environment, which is not good business, you want the team to succeed. If you're Doug Wilson, you want this team to win.
Well, they better, or he'll be fired. I mean,
yes, but he's got to. If he can't trade those guys, then you got to do the best working around them. You signed him to those deals. You agreed to bring them on at those contracts and gave them the no movement clauses and gave them the power.
And in the end,
you got to deal with it.
You slit your own throat, basically.
Yeah, you got to deal with it, though. And he's got to build this team. And I think he's doing his best, but I don't think the defense is there. He's hoping Martin Jones is good enough to be the goalie they needed in the past. And maybe he will be. But I don't think he is. I think we've seen a history of Kings backups that looked great with the Kings. And then when you're not behind the Kings defense, suddenly you don't look so good. Jonathan Bernier, Ben Scrivens, and now I think Martin Jones will be the latest to that. Man, he looks so good behind the Kings defensive system. Why doesn't he look that good now that he doesn't have any of the Kings defensemen in front of him? So we'll see. I think this is going to be a struggling year where they're in between. Some of our fans on Periscope saying that they're stuck in reverse.
A lot of comments about Doug Wilson.
Yeah, they're not encouraging. No. Luckily, they're not about the good man that sent us the Tim Tams.
That's right.
He's a saint.
Yeah.
Indeed. Should have been fired 3 years ago, according to a fan on Periscope.
Doug Wilson is a moron.
Yep. And they have to try and build the best team they can around Matt Marleau and Thornton because they aren't leaving. There you go. I agree with that because I just said it. Think about the team they could have had with the return for Marleau and Thornton in 2012-2013 if they had traded him back then. They're not going anywhere, though. They like playing there, and why wouldn't you? It's beautiful weather, no media pressure, and you get paid millions of dollars. And not a bad situation. We'll see what Pete DeBoer can do. He's got a tough task coming into this room where there's obviously a problem between one of your star players and the GM. And he's trying to build the team's confidence back up around veterans that are on the back nine of their career. So I think Pete DeBoer's got a tough situation. I think Doug Wilson's in a tough situation. And I think the team is in a tough situation, but they have the talent to make the playoffs. It's just a matter of getting out there and getting the job done and deciding amongst themselves. I think if I was Pete DeBoer, I would spend this training camp as much on team building as anything else. I want these guys all pulling the same rope and all being on the same page mentally so that we can go into this and everybody's fighting for themselves. And I think that's key for this team. They have the talent. They need the mentality and the approach and the desire to go out there and win.
And we close out the preview of the Pacific Division with a look at the Vancouver Canucks. Last year, a record of 48-29-5. Finished second in the Pacific Division. Lost in 6 games to Calgary in the Western Conference quarterfinals. Willie Desjardins is in his second season, is going to be in his second season as head coach.
Once he gets back from hip surgery.
That's right, once he waddles his way in there on crutches or whatever.
Ironsides.
There's some additions for the Canucks. Left winger Brandon Prust, center Brandon Sutter, and goalie Richard Bachman. Some subtractions for the Canucks. Goalie Eddie Lack, defenseman Kevin Bieksa, Right winger Zach Cassian, center Nick Bonino, defenseman Adam Clendenning, center Sean Matthias, right winger Brad Richardson, and defenseman Ryan Stanton.
Well, the Vancouver Canucks, I think it's universal. They will be the team that has the biggest drop from last season. I mean, when you look at the roster they have, it's amazing. They were in second place in the Pacific Division last season.
Yeah.
And there is not a snowball's chance in Hades that they will return to second place in the Pacific Division this season.
I wouldn't think so either. I mean, the Sedins are a year older. Ryan Miller, I mean, a solid veteran, but, I'm not sure his best years, I would think, are behind him as well. Not a lot of additions. I know Brandon Sutter, we all like him, but as you mentioned when we talked about the deal at the time, great third-line center. Not sure about him being a second-line center.
Right.
Appears to be playing out of his role. They lose a veteran in Kevin Bieksa on their blue line. I don't see a lot of, when you look at what they did, I don't see a lot of reasons to be optimistic that they're going to be any better, certainly, than they were a year ago.
You tell me if this defense puts confidence in your heart with Ryan Miller between the net. Keep that between the pipes.
Yeah.
Alexander Edler, Dan Hamhuis, Chris Tanev, Yannick Weber, Lucas Spiza, Frank Corrado, Matt Bartkowski. That sound like a defense that's going to make the playoffs? Sounds like a bunch of guys that at second pairing at best. And if two of those guys have to go out and play against the other team's top line, Alex Edler is a fine defenseman. Dan Hamhuis is a fine defenseman. I don't know that I trust him to go out there and shut down a team's first line and protect a one-goal lead. I don't think they have the scoring depth that they used to have. I think Daniel Sedin and Henrik Sedin are fine players, as we talked about, and they're going to get theirs. But who's going to score beyond that? Radim Verbata certainly is going to produce. But is Alexander Burrows still a scoring threat? I don't think so. Chris Higgins? No. Brandon Sutter's going to have a great year. Bo Horvat's going to have a great year. This team's going to have a lot of surprise production from a lot of players, both at forward and on defense, to keep themselves in the playoff hunt. I just don't see it. I don't think Ryan Miller is good enough to steal games for this team on a regular basis and outplay the goalie across the rink from him. I think this team is in a decline, and I think it's going to be a rapid decline from the success they had last year. Second place in the Pacific Division last year. I've got them in fifth place this coming season, and I think this is going to be this is kind of the first. I think it was a surprise last year that Jim Benning got this team into second place. I think he's still installing his system, his players. I think the rebuild begins in earnest this season. And I think we're going to see a team that is definitely a seller come the trade deadline with Radim Verbata in his last year of his contract. Why not get rid of him and get good return? That would be a great guy for a team to add at the trade deadline. If you can get a guy like Radim Verbata on a short-term deal, they could get lucrative return on that. Maybe they're in the playoffs in that time, but I don't think they will be. And if they're not, this is a team that could use their assets. They have attractive players on the free agent market or on the trade market if they want to put them up there, and could speed up the rebuild in Vancouver.
Some comments on Periscope. Are the Canucks really as bad as I think they're going to be? This is the year the Sedins should get out. They no longer have a shot at the Cup in Vancouver. Bring back Torts and light a fire under their bench. No, don't do that.
That would be entertaining.
Yeah.
Have to go after the Flames locker room again.
Chris Tanev is good too. Burrows is a biting threat? Is that what that says? Okay.
Remember he got the accusation that he bit the guy in the finger?
Okay, all right. Someone said woof.
Yeah. I think that's pretty much going to describe the Vancouver Canucks.
I've got them in fifth place.
If we were doing the old NFL films where they had the slogan for each team's video, the Vancouver Canucks 2015, 2016, woof. I don't think it's going to be good. I don't think
they'll do that. Remember, they would always, no matter what team it was like the 0-15 Lions, they still put a positive spin on it. It was like, tough team to play against. You know what I mean? It was always somehow they made it seem like it was a good
Nobody
season.
died. The hot dogs are delicious. They did do that, and that was our friend John's complaint, that they could make any team look like the Super Bowl champs. You watch that 30-minute video, you're like, this team, how'd they lose every game? And then you watch every other team's highlight video, and every highlight is against the Lions. And you're like, wow, that's how. Yeah, it's going to be a bad year for the Canucks, I have a feeling. So let's go over your order of finish. If I remember correctly, I had Anaheim,
I think
Los Angeles,
had
Calgary,
right.
San Jose, Vancouver, Edmonton, and Arizona. You have the exact same with the exception of Calgary in second and the Kings in third. So we've got the same three teams getting the automatic playoff bids. And your difference is LA in third, and I have them in second. Calgary in second for you. Calgary in third for me. San Jose, make the playoffs or no as a wild card?
Oh boy, I'm going to say no.
I think they do.
I think they're in the mix. I don't think they get in though.
You know what? I'm going to agree because as I think about it, the Central Division is loaded. They are a double-barrel gun, loaded and ready for bear. That is a division that is going to send five teams to the playoffs, which means the Pacific Division can only send three. So San Jose, you're out. Vancouver, Edmonton, and Arizona, you are out as well. In our predictions, we will see.
All right, so that was our look at the Pacific Division. What are we doing next week? What are we going back over to the Eastern Conference?
Of course.
All right.
Pick your poison. You like yourself some Metropolitan?
Oh, I love the Metropolitan.
Or do you want to go with? Well, there's only two options.
Yeah, I know.
You want to go Metropolitan?
Yeah, let's go Metropolitan.
Metropolitan Division it is next week. And then in 2 weeks we will do the Central Division, and that's going to be a fun one because, as I said, the Central Division in the National Hockey League is, in my opinion, the best division in all of sports. There is not
all of sports.
In all of sports.
All right.
Who's the bad team in the Central Division? That's my point. I mean, the worst team is good. There are no Arizona Coyotes. There are no Toronto Maple Leafs. There are no Florida or Carolina Hurricanes. Every team has a chance to make the playoffs in the Central Division, and that is going to be a fun division to watch. If NBC wants to make them their weekly Wednesday night rivalry, and it's a Central Division matchup every week, that would be good television. I would enjoy that.
Thanks to everybody that joined us on Periscope. Thanks to Jeff for being our transcriber. Would that be the right word? For helping us to get some of the comments from the listeners.
Reporter.
Jeff, you're hired if you want to do it again next week. So thank you for that. And thanks for listening to this video broadcast of the Puck Podcast look at the Pacific Division.
We'll be right back with the third period, including postcards, listener email, and more.